Hi, it's me, Jacqueline. Welcome to my channel. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and join me at Patreon. Link in the description. Billy was a pretty boy. Everyone said so. When Mother pushed him about in his stroller, the women of the community would inevitably compliment her on what a beautiful little girl she had. Cynthia loved hearing every compliment and thanked the women for their kind words. Billy was 3 at the time, and while he enjoyed the smiles, the hugs, and the women and girls fawning over him, he didn't yet understand that a boy should be the recipient of comments like, "What a handsome little fellow," rather than, "What a precious little girl." The problem was that Cynthia always wanted a girl, not a boy. Consequently, she was not dismayed when the neighbor women complimented Billy on his femininity. The fact is that the misidentification of Billy's true gender was not caused by a lack of discernment on the part of the women, but was in actuality prompted by Cynthia herself. For you see, Cynthia dressed Billy in the sweetest little dresses and panties that money could buy. Billy was being feminized by a doting mother whose child was the light of her life. Billy started to realize that he was different than other boys when Daddy suddenly came home from the war. Major James Richards had left for a 2-year tour overseas when Billy was only 2, and before Mommy had begun to dress him in dresses. Desiring to surprise his beloved wife and child, he came home unexpectedly 2 weeks before his scheduled discharge date. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Cynthia opened the door of their Kenilworth Lakeside home. She was thrilled to see her husband, but the Major noticed a look of panic in his wife's eyes. Holding her close, he said, "Are you okay, hon? You seem almost afraid of me." "I haven't been gone that long, have I?" Cynthia shifted nervously in her husband's arms while looking uneasily behind her. Suddenly, a beautifully dressed child appeared, clad in a delicate yellow dress with just a hint of lacy slip showing under the hem. She was wearing white, lace-trimmed socks with shiny white Mary Jane shoes with pretty bows. In her hair, she wore a satin ribbon that matched her dress. The child's nails were painted a delicate pink, and Major Richards could see traces of mascara and lipstick that had been carefully applied. He appeared confused, wondering who this child model was. Then it dawned on him. It was Billy. Cynthia had Billy in dresses. The Major's first reaction was, "Oh my goodness, CYN, what have you done to Billy?" Cynthia hugged her husband closely and said, "Oh, please do not be angry with me, James. You know how I always wanted a little girl, and Billy has been a wonderful companion to me while you were gone. I know that, hon, but look at him. He looks totally like a girl. Come over here, little guy." The little boy didn't know quite what to think, but walked gracefully to his father and was hoisted into his arms. Major Richards, without thinking, adjusted the skirt of his child's dress and said, "How is my little boy?" Billy replied in a shy voice, "Are you going to live with us now, Daddy?" The Major replied, "Yes, I am, son. And I look forward to our getting reacquainted and getting out and playing some ball together. Would you like that?" Cynthia, while she loved her husband, had a troubled look on her face. She could see that James was in denial of the changed situation. She said, "Excuse me, James, but I do not think that Billy cares that much for baseball." "Of course he does, CYN. All red-blooded American boys love to play baseball. It's our national pastime." Cynthia looked at Billy and saw that the child seemed a little confused. She reached out her hands and took Billy from his father and sat him on her lap, carefully smoothing his skirts. She then said, "James, there have been some changes made while you were gone. Some of the other army wives and I have decided that we did not want our little boys to grow up to be soldiers and have to go to war like our husbands. So we decided among ourselves that we would take it upon ourselves to raise our sons to be delicate, sensitive, and peace-loving children. Billy has other interests now." "CYN, I'm not sure I understand what you are telling me," James replied. "Other interests? What kind of interests?" "I want him to be interested in baseball, football, and basketball, the same things I was interested in when I was his age." "Oh dear," said Cynthia, "I see that we are going to have a long talk. Billy has more refined interests now. He enjoys helping me sew and do housework, and he even likes to help me prepare meals in the kitchen. Billy is not interested in running around the ball field and getting all dirty, Are you, sweetheart? Billy stood at Cynthia's side, clinging to the sides of his dress, and nodded his head in agreement with his mother. Now wait a minute, James said. It sounds as if this is not just a little dress-up game that you and Billy are playing. Are you serious about turning him into a little girl? Cynthia knew that this moment would eventually arrive, and she hoped that she had the fortitude to remain strong. She looked her husband in the eye and said, "Yes, James, I want Billy to be a girl." Upon hearing these words, the child threw his arms around his mother and heard her say, "Everything is fine, honey. This is all new to Daddy, but he will come to understand what is best for you." Cynthia then whispered in Billy's ear, "You're Mommy's little girl, honey, and I will not let Daddy change you back into a boy again. Now go to your room and play with your dolls while I talk to Daddy." At this, the boy got up and waving sheepishly with one hand to his father, he walked off gracefully in his little dress, as his mother told him to do. "James," Cynthia began, "I love you very much, but you have been gone for 2 years. During this time, Billy and I have developed a very close relationship, and we are both very happy. I know that it is a shock to you to see Billy in dresses, but it is best for him and for me too. I grew up as the oldest in a family of 5 girls, and I helped my mother raise my younger sisters. I know all about little girls, and quite frankly, I do not understand boys even to this day. When I got married to you and you were shipped overseas 2 months later, I began to feel lonely for the days with my family. I missed caring for my sisters, and the only one around was Billy. So I decided to pour out my love on him, just like I did for my sisters." Major Richards listened intently as his wife filled him in on the early feminization of his child. Cynthia continued, "One day, it was pouring rain outside. Billy was 3 and both of us were bored. He had been coloring all morning and was restless because he couldn't go outside. That's when I got the idea to dress him up. Believe me, James, it wasn't the first time I had thought about it. A couple of weeks after you left, Billy and I went to Marshall Field's department store, and I bought several dresses in his size, for slips, several pairs of panties, hair ribbons, pretty little girl socks with lace, and cute little shoes. I pretended that Billy was a girl and that I was shopping for him. The salesgirl at the checkout counter gave me the strangest looks. She would look at the dresses and then at Billy and then back at me, but I didn't say anything. When we arrived home, I put the lingerie in his bureau and hung the dresses up in his closet, not knowing if I would even have the nerve to dress him up. Then one rainy day, it seems, everything fell into place. I took the coloring book out of his hands and said, "Come to Mommy, honey." I sat on the side of the bed and said, "Billy, today is going to be a special day for you. Mommy has a nice surprise that you are going to like so very much." His little eyes looked so joyful and expectant because every child loves surprises. I then reached behind my back and showed him the pink, lace-trimmed nylon girls' panties that I had bought especially for him. Major Richards listened, almost mesmerized by his wife's story. She continued, I said, "Hold on to Mommy's shoulder and step into your panties, dear." I did not ask him if he wanted to wear them. I felt it was best that there was no choice involved so he would not think it was strange. Cynthia seemed to glow as she related the story and said, "James, I felt an almost electric feeling go through me as I pulled up his panties. I instinctively knew they was right for him, and I felt that I was at the dawn of having the girl child I have dreamed about." Cynthia said, "Billy looked adorable standing before me in his pink panties, and I know that they felt good on him because a sweet little girlish smile adorned his face. I said to him, 'That's right, dear. You can smile. Mommy knows how pretty you feel in your new panties. All girls love wearing such pretty things." Cynthia continued, "At this point, I started getting really excited, James. I had taken the first step, and I knew it would only get better from here as I led our son deeper into the femininity I wanted him to experience." I then reached back on the bed and held up his new petticoat. "Oh my," James interrupted. "You bought him a petticoat too." "I did," Cynthia exclaimed. "I really did." I held it up before him, swished it a few times, watching his expression. I hoped so much that he would take to it without rebelling like some boys might do. "How did he react?" James inquired. "I think he was in 7th heaven, James." Billy had this faraway look, almost as if he was being transported to another world. I had to bring him back to reality by saying, "Put your arms up, sweetheart, so mommy can put your new petticoat on you." James asked, "Did he try to pull away from you?" It appeared that James was hoping that his son had not totally succumbed to the feminization being thrust upon him by his mother. But his hopes were dashed when Cynthia said, "No, he did not resist, James." Instead, I heard him utter a little sigh as I lowered the nylon lace petticoat over his head and let it fall to just above his knees. Cynthia said, "James, you'll never guess what he did next." James said, "What did he do?" Cynthia replied, "He began to cry like a little girl and hugged me around the waist." I think the experience was so overwhelming to him that he got all choked up just like I did when I put on my dress on my wedding day. I felt so close to him at that moment, Cynthia confessed. But I needed to lighten the atmosphere, so I said, "Honey, you look beautiful. Can you twirl your petticoat for mommy? Spin around, dear, and see how your skirt swirls around you." Well, your son did as he was told, and he made the prettiest picture. In fact, James, I got the camera and caught him in a beautiful pose with his skirts twirling in the air. He was a little embarrassed the last time I showed him the photo because his pretty panties were showing under his petticoat. Major Richards was becoming increasingly intrigued as his wife narrated the early days of his son's transformation into a little girl. He could tell that Cynthia loved Billy with all her heart, and he knew that while she would never do anything to harm her child, he sensed that her need for a daughter was obsessive to the point of not really giving Billy a say in the matter. Major Richards decided that he would need to determine if Billy was a willing participant in his conversion into a little girl. But first, he wanted to let Cynthia finish her story. Cynthia continued, "James, after I had him in his petticoat and panties, I couldn't wait to get his dress on him. I told him that he looked absolutely beautiful in his petticoat, but that all girls wore pretty dresses over such pretty things." Billy just nodded his head, and I slipped a dress of beautiful pink satin with an organza overlay over his head. His dress had beaded appliques that adorned the neckline as well as the sleeves. A large organza bow was fastened at the waist. James, I zipped our child's dress up the back, and he truly looked like a little princess. I was so happy that I started to cry. Major Richards, who dearly loved his wife and who was happy to see her and his child again, listened carefully as his wife poured out her heart to him. She had not planned to tell him about Billy's new life immediately, but he had surprised both of them by his early arrival. He saw Billy in his pretty yellow dress, so Cynthia thought it would be best to be honest and get the whole thing out in the open. But now it was time to question Billy. James said to his wife, "Han, call the child out here, and let's find out what he thinks about all this." Cynthia called, "Billy dear, would you come out here now?" Billy walked out holding a beautifully dressed doll in his arms. James choked up a bit as he saw how tenderly his son held the doll and how perfectly at home he seemed to be in his dress. The boy was still a little shy around his father and walked over and stood alongside his mother, who was his best friend. The two had had hours of girl time together, and the boy was not accustomed to being around males. He whispered to his mother, "Mommy, am I still going to be a girl now that Daddy is back?" His mother whispered back, "Of course you are, sweetie. You'll always be Mommy's girl." "Promise me, Mommy," the boy whispered. "Yes, baby doll, I promise," Cynthia said. At this, Major Richards said, "Now let's not have any more secrets, girls. I'm part of this family too, you know." Cynthia couldn't believe that she was hearing right. Did James just refer to her and Billy as girls, or was she imagining things? Cynthia looked at James and said, "Oh, James, I think you do understand after all. You really know how important it is to me to have a little girl." James just smiled and said, "Billy, come over to Daddy for a moment." The child, who was clinging to his mother, reluctantly sashayed over to his father. James then said to him, "Billy, I see that you and Mommy have grown very close while I was gone. You dress like Mommy, you act like her, and you seem to be a girl like her. So I want to ask you a very important question, and you have to answer Daddy truthfully." "Okay." Billy nodded his head and Daddy asked, "Billy, do you want to be a little girl?" The child, who had recently turned 4, nodded his head and said, "Yes, Daddy, I want to be a girl just like Mommy." "Now Billy," James responded, That means that you can't be going back and forth from being a girl to a boy and a boy to a girl. You can only be one or the other. Cynthia looked on hopefully as Daddy questioned Billy. James said, Billy, if you are going to be a girl, then you must wear dresses and skirts and nightgowns like Mommy. We will let your hair grow long and treat you like a young Mississippi. You will be polite and ladylike at all times. Is that what you want? The child replied, Yes, Daddy, and then to the surprise of both parents, he made the daintiest little curtsy. Cynthia was thrilled. James had understood after all, and the two of them would live a wonderful life together, bringing up their new little girl, who by her gentle manner and loving attitude would make the Richards one of the happiest families around. That night, Cynthia dressed Billy in a light pink nylon nightgown with matching panties, handed him his doll, and put him to bed. Little Billy felt so loved and so at peace because he knew Mommy and Daddy loved their little girl and that he would always have pretty dresses to wear, dolls to play with, and ribbons in his hair. Epilogue: Cynthia and James raised Billy as a girl, and the child developed into a well-behaved preteen and teenager. Enrolled in an all-girls school, he learned the finer points of femininity and made his mother and father very proud. His mother, Cynthia, never got tired of her child telling her, Thank you, Mommy, for making me a girl. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access.